9 bad financial decisions that everyone makes. Is there something to that?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, Brian, I'm so excited about this show because we're going to basically do a deep dive into behavioral finance, into behavioral economics, because a lot of what we cover are like, it's blocking and tackling. It's X's and O's when it comes to financial decision making, but a lot of what we do when we make financial decisions has more to do with the behavior than the academic nature of it. And that's kind of what we're going to go through today.
I'm hoping everybody who watches this doesn't treat this as a coping mechanism.
Sure.
That's why I'm like that, is because it's baked into the recipe. No, this is supposed to be something where you learn to spot what's going on, because this stuff is baked into the recipe, but there is a way for you to kind of master it, move beyond, and figure out how you can harness the power of some of these things that are just influences that can drive your actions and your behavior.
Absolutely.
So there's 2 books that kind of influence this show in a lot of ways. Bo claims he has not read this book, but I got it because every time when I was doing the Chris Voss book, Never Split the Difference, he's an FBI guy who was a negotiator, and you use a lot of these tactics.
Here's the thing. So back in the day, we'll talk a lot about back in the day. You and I shared an Audible account.
Yep.
Well, frankly, because I was a tightwad, and you had good taste in books. This was in your Audible, but I never read this. I'm not familiar.
Because as I was listening
book.
to it, I was like, that son of a gun, Bo. I can totally see when he's tried to use this on me. But just to tell you, what Chris explains is that the FBI recognized after Waco, Texas, it did not go well, that they needed to throw the book out on how they were handling hostage negotiations and other things like that. And he just goes into all the different behavioral components. And here's what his quote was. What I am saying is that while our decisions may be largely irrational, that doesn't mean there aren't consistent patterns, principles, and rules behind how we act. And once you know these mental patterns, you start to see ways to influence them.
So I think the takeaway there is that human beings don't always act in a rational manner. We're not completely rational beings that this is a black decision, this is a white decision, this is the right decision, this is the wrong decision. That's not the way that we always behave, even though it seems like perhaps that should be the way we behave. It seems common
in theory,
sense.
we should be rational, functioning beings, but it just doesn't work that way. And that led to there's the Misbehaving book by Richard Thaler, which is the making of behavioral economics. Now, what's funny is if you go watch any of the interviews, Richard's very quick to tell you, hey, I'm not the first person to come up with behavioral economics. Actually, Adam Smith, which anybody who follows me, matter of fact, we had a content meeting, and I was shocked because I had to give Reby a whole education. Adam Smith is huge to me. Like last year, I can remember my daughter, when she's doing her social studies, when I found out they were studying Adam Smith, it made me so happy because realize the timing of when Wealth of Nations was published in the 1700s with the birth of America, I don't think it's a coincidence. So there's a lot of things, and Adam Smith, when he in a lot of his writings, including Wealth of Nations, he does talk about overconfidence. He does talk about loss aversion, self-control. So I thought it was cool that Richard gave him a shout out. But if you go deeper, Richard is going to give you examples of things that are happening in everybody's life that are definitely influenced by behavioral economics.
And I think it's realistic that we all think about money irrationally. Even if we can be the most educated, most well-informed, we all approach it in somewhat of an irrational manner.
So let's jump into this. I want to set the stage for you guys. So y'all know I'm a big Disney fan. Kind of missing going to the Disney parks because we were supposed to have done that in the spring. We were going out to Disneyland. And one of my favorite things when you're at Disney, well, I thought would be one of my favorite things, it's kind of a mirage, was you get hungry and you're walking through the parks and you catch a whiff. You go, oh my gosh, that is the best smelling food that I could put in my mouth. And it's a Walt Disney World turkey leg. Now, these things look glorious. They're huge. They're scrumptious looking. But then you buy these things, and unfortunately to me, the taste does not match the smell because to me, it was a very gristle-filled, super sodium-filled. I mean, it was just not everything I thought the smell would give. But here's the thing. When you pay $12.50 for a turkey leg, you eat that thing. You don't, even if you're not enjoying it, you get it down because you've got to recoup the cost of what you've dumped into that turkey leg.
So there is a behavioral finance concept that describes that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to lay out some stories. We're going to lay out some examples for you guys today. And in the chat, if you're hanging out with us live, go ahead and start throwing them out there. If you think you can guess which behavioral finance concept we're talking about, throw it out there. So you just said you go to Disney, you smell the turkey leg, you pay the $12.50, you start gnawing on it, you get like 3 or 4 bites in. And
it's not everything you thought it was going to be.
But you say, you know what? I'm going to finish it. I'm going to keep eating this thing, right? Isn't that what you say?
What I think is interesting, if you do research, by the way, is a whole thing about the Disney World turkey legs. There are bloggers who talk about you should share this with somebody. Now, we're in a COVID era now where that just seems ridiculous, but I will tell you, even pre-COVID, I would no more want to share a turkey leg. I've been married 22 years, still not sharing a turkey leg. That's kind of gross.
Back in 2011, last time you and I went to Disney together, I don't remember us walking down sharing a turkey leg. So what is the personal finance concept that represents?
Well, it's a sunk cost fallacy. Here's the thing, guys. There's no reason. If you've already dumped the money into this and you realize it's just not as good as you thought it was going to be, you don't have to justify the action by continuing to consume it. But guess what? You will, because somehow we feel like it's okay. It's the same thing if you went to a horrible concert or it's raining outside, on the night of the concert, it's at an amphitheater. You still are going to show up just because you've spent the money on the tickets.
But this isn't just limited to or related to turkey legs at Disney World. We actually see this all of the time in the personal finance and the financial arena. A really easy example that we talk about all the time that we see with clients and prospects is you put some money into an investment that's gone bad, but you continue to hold it because you can't settle losing for that money. You have to make the money back before you can think about exiting the position.
Now you have an analogy. I've heard you use this with clients and prospects. Something about a bicycle. So in the markets.
If you think about a valley, you have a peak on one end and you go through a trough and you come to the peak on the other. And if you were riding a bicycle through this valley and you're riding down
My description was horrible.
And at the bottom, you get a flat tire. This is what I always ask clients and prospects. Would you ride that flat tire back up to the top and then change it? Or perhaps would you change the tire at the bottom of the valley and have a better ride up? Well, a lot of times with investing, it's that way. I've got this stock, I've got this dog, and man, it's just not done well, but perhaps that's because it's a bad company or the economy's bad. Do you want to ride the recovery in that stock, or perhaps might it be better for you to move that into a better asset moving forward to come out of that valley? A lot of times people don't do that, and it's because they struggle with the idea of the sunk cost fallacy.
I think it even goes beyond that. If you think about the cycle of market emotions, Bo, how often do we see people throw even more money at a bad investment because they just say, I'm going to double it down. I'm going to do it. So they take good money and they chase after the bad investment. So don't let sunk cost fallacy really derail what can happen. Make sure the investments, the reason you own them is because they're good investments for the long term, not because you're trying to cover up a mistake of the past.
Love it. All right.
So here's the second situation I want to share with you. I go every 2 years to Las Vegas for the SEMA Auto Accessories Show. And one of the things is that we eat out there, but we don't eat the nicest meals.
Okay.
But I want to share with you guys, last November, pre-COVID, we did all right. I mean, everybody in my group made a few $100s playing craps. And even though we're not big spenders or foodies, typically, we went to the nicest steak restaurant. And when they threw out a special, and this special was like the steak costs $1 gazillion, we were like, bring it. And I'm telling you, every one of us, even though there was 4 of us, and this is just an example picture because we've been doing this trip for a while. That bill was ridiculous. I mean, it was like $200, $250 a person.
Right.
We would no more in the Man in the Moon go spend that much on food. But because we had won it, it didn't feel like that money was the same $250 I would go, like, you could buy a lot with $200. It was because I won it in Las Vegas that it just seemed like fake. It didn't seem real.
And so what the personal finance fallacy, the personal finance behavioral economics idea that you fell prey to was mental accounting. And this occurs when we assign different values to money because of where we came from. You and your buddies would have never gone and eaten that gazillion-dollar steak, but because you perceive that money to be free money, new money, found money, you decided to go buy the steak.
It's exactly right. And we see this happen all the time. When you think about the financial concept I'm thinking about is how often, even as a kid, your grandma sends you a birthday card. Birthday money gets spent. You know, you're not saving that, but there's something to that because money is $1 that grandma gives you is the same as the $1 you earned. And there's even a term for that.
Yeah, money is fungible. $1 from this source is the same thing as $1 from that source. So if you are someone who comes into gifted money, treat it like it was money that you earned. We see this all the time in the financial world when someone wins the lottery. We don't see that all the time, but maybe they sell a business, they get an inheritance, they get some insurance proceeds, and all of a sudden they start spending the money very differently than if they had just earned that from their working wages, from going to work every day. If you want to be a financial mutant, you have to realize that that money is in fact fungible. $100 in one hand is the same as $100 in another hand, no matter where it comes from.
And I just give the advice, don't let the surroundings also, because you mentioned where it comes from. The source could be that it was like a lottery winner. And there, man, we know there's a lot of lottery winners that struggle with keeping resources when they come to them. I think it is because that mental accounting in their head. But I'd also say be careful of your surroundings. A lot of us have a different mindset when we're on vacation. We're just like, this money's not real. I'm just going to spend and it doesn't matter because I think that's definitely having an influence. And Vegas has that same impact too, as I'm even proof. A tightwad like me having those thoughts shows you
that it happens to everyone.
So let's talk about, and Bo, you probably have noticed we have a prop on the desk today.
Yeah, so Brian, I want to tell you, I've got a deal for you. And everyone knows that Brian Preston loves a deal. What if I told you that I would sell you an action figure from one of your favorite enterprises of all time, right? And I wanted to sell you a Boba Fett action figure, and you can buy it for the low-cost price of $11,999.99. Would you buy it?
There's not a action figure out there that I would spend $12,000. I'm shocked. When I saw this, we had FTE Daniel do the research. I was like, oh my goodness. I had no idea. I mean, I was thinking these things were worth $200 or $300, and then Daniel pops this.
By the way, I still think it'd be crazy to be worth $200.
I would know more than the man on the moon. I know I keep saying that saying, but that's how big it is. I would spend $12,000 on an action figurine.
Yet, as we stand here right now, you actually have that very action figure. So that made me, the very rational one of the two of us, say, hey, Brian, we ought to sell that Boba Fett. Think about if we were to sell that thing and we could go invest those dollars and we could grow it at 7 times over or 88 times over. How amazing would that be? Let me know when you want me to start taking the pictures and we're going to go put it on eBay or Amazon and get it sold. And what did you say when I came up with that idea?
I can't sell this.
I can't sell it.
I love this thing. I mean, if anything, I'm going to go buy a protective case for it now. And what's funny is if you ask me, I had Yoda here. And I thought because I had the orange snake, he was going to be worth more than Boba Fett.
Right.
But holy cow. I mean,
Boba
this was
Fett
my favorite.
holds its value.
You have a favorite toy when as a child, you want to take this toy everywhere. Like you take him shopping.
Oh, yeah.
You take him. That's why you run a risk of losing your favorite toys.
Because you take them everywhere.
You sleep with them in the bed because you love your toys. I can't believe I still have this thing, but I'm not selling it. But there is something to this, is that a rational Brian I should sell this. I should totally sell this because it could help with kids' college and so forth, but I'm not.
But because you are irrational, no offense, I am too, you struggle with the endowment effect, which is when we value something more just because we own it. If I gave you the opportunity to go buy that action figure today for what it costs, you wouldn't do it. But you could sell it and have that money, you won't do it.
Yep.
It is a very irrational thought.
It is irrational. And I will tell you where this happens in your financial life, because I've made this mistake as well. Think about selling your house. A lot of us live in our houses. We have great memories. We raise our children in our houses. We think these things are worth a lot. So when you go to sell your house, you're putting the value at a very high level. If you watch any real estate show, they do this. You see this happen all the time. Real estate agents have to battle this problem. And I did this. This is in the background here. This is my very first house that my wife and I built.
Which, by the way,
down in Georgia.
When the whole team saw this, they're like, "What a beautiful house!
I love
it.
This house was beautiful. You know what the problem was is that you had to go up a gazillion stairs because this house was so high.
Those grocery carrying muscles got worked out.
But it is one of those things where I think we put this house on the market. Now, this sounds so cheap living here in Nashville now. And everybody in California and New York is going to be like, holy cow, you can buy that for that. I put this house on the market for $225,000. A week later, I got an offer for $215,000 with no closing cost because it was a military relocation.
That sounds great.
It was my endowment effect. I told, the real estate agent, I told her, hey, if we get a contract in the first week, we're going to get the full 225. You know what I ended up selling this house for? I sold this house to my second real estate agent's nephew because I dropped the price to $199 and then gave them $10,000 of closing costs. So if you think about $189 net
right
from $215, I got destroyed. And it was all because of the endowment effect.
All because you placed more value on it than it was actually there. So if we can recognize that early on, perhaps we can make wiser financial decisions. Now, I'll give you some grace here. First house, you started the family in the house. There's some sentimental value, so I get that.
That's the behavioral economics that screws it up. So realize when, especially big financial transactions like your house, just because you have an emotional attachment to it, make sure you're taking every offer serious because it might be your last one without gutting the price.
All right, let's see if you guys can get this next one. Now, this one's interesting to me because I thought that I was going to be picking on you as it relates to this idea. And we started telling the story. The whole content team started picking on me. Yeah. So when you guys come to visit us in Franklin, Tennessee, there is a Kilwin's Chocolate Factory. Is that the name of it? Kilwin's Bakery, Kilwin's whatever it's called, right below us and right around the corner. So it's wonderful if you ever want to go get some ice cream or whatever.
Well, we get nothing for that, by the way.
One of the wonderful things that you can do when you go into Kilwin's is they have all these different types of fudge. They got dark fudge and white fudge and peanut butter fudge. And they will very, very happily just slice you off a little chunk and let you have a sample so you can try the different flavors. So one of the things that I do if I'm ever out and around downtown just walking around, I'll just pop into Kilwin's and say, hey, I'd like to try the turtle fudge. And they will give me the fudge, and I'll take it, and I'll eat it, and I'll say, wow, that was delicious, thank you. And then I'll just walk out and go on my way, and I'll just leave.
So you're a horrible example because you're actually breaking
that's
behavioral economics, because this is what we've tried to explain. Everybody knows me. When I go on vacation with the family, if we ever go into an ice cream shop and they're offering samples, and this is why even at the mall, when they're trying to give you the free samples of chicken, as soon as I won't take them because I know if I take a sample, I'm probably going to buy something from that person.
And there's no problem. I've been with you enough to see this. You 100% are going to buy it.
So Bo is the exception. The majority of you are probably just like me in the fact that if somebody offers you a sample or they offer you something free, you're going to feel indebted to that person. So what we talk about here from a behavioral economics standpoint is that there is a social contract that's built into every one of us. There's a reason, guys, that when anybody's trying to sell you a product, they first try to ingratiate themselves into. Look, we're guilty to a degree. Think about this. You come to the Money Guy show. We talk about the abundance cycle. Learn, apply, grow. We give you all this free advice so that down the road, when you have a level of success, you remember the guys who gave you all the
free samples.
Advice. This is a social contract. This is such an effective thing that you need to be aware of what's going on. But look, I think the abundance cycle is actually healthy because we're
Absolutely.
part of your success by giving you all this free education. But let's talk about where this actually plays out in other areas.
Yeah, so we think that one of the ones that are most common in our industry, and we see this all the time from prospects and even some of our clients, there will be a local neighborhood advisor or retail advisor who will say, hey, come out to this steak dinner, our treat, we'd love to treat you, and just tell you about our program, just tell you about our platform. And what you don't realize is you're going to go get that steak dinner, and you are going to get the heavy, hard sales pitch for whatever the thing that advisor is selling. So in reality, that free steak dinner may be very, very costly if you fall prey to the sales techniques.
Well, think about timeshares.
Oh, that's another great example.
Why do they give you? I mean, think about this. Next time somebody pitches you a timeshare, they'll offer you massages. They'll offer you nice meals. I mean, these are things all that have a over $100, $200, $300 value. They cannot do that unless what they're trying to sell you is lucrative enough to make it happen. But they are trying to engage a social contract so you have some type of connection with them and you feel obligated to pay them back for that gift.
Now, there are some mutants out there. I don't want to suggest that my Killen's example means I'm a mutant. It probably just means that I don't conform to the social norms. I probably have an issue there. However, we do have friends that say, hey, I love to go on vacation and I love to sit through the timeshare presentation because I know that no matter what, I'm not going to buy the timeshare and I'm still going to get the free excursion or the free massage or whatever. Well, if your time is worth that and you're okay sacrificing some of your vacation time, that's great. What you need to understand is whenever there are free offers, you should always just think in the back of your mind, what's the ulterior motive?
What's the catch?
What's the catch? What's the thing they're going to try to coerce me to do? If you can go into that with your eyes wide open, you're going to set yourself up to recognize it pretty early on.
You ready to move on to the next one?
Oh, yeah. I'm ready for this one.
This one kind of, guys, I want y'all to know, you can already probably tell, Bo's sitting to my left here. Bo's been with me, 12 years? Going on 13 years now?
13, yeah. Long time.
So this next picture cracked me up because Bo, as y'all can probably tell, is pretty persuasive. He's one of those guys that you can see. There's one of the earlier pictures. Look at those sweet pleats we both are wearing.
Yeah, those are pleated slacks, if you all wanted to know, both of us.
I'm not sure how the picture on the right made it into this because I look like a middle-aged man with a bowl cut that just ate a huge buffet.
Well, the reason is because you weren't quite a middle-aged man. It wasn't quite a bowl cut, but we did just finish eating a buffet in this picture.
So here's the point of this whole setup is that Bo is a CFA. We know that that's probably the most prestigious investment credential you can get is the CFA because it's 3 years worth of testing. And Bo is a persuasive guy. So probably after he had passed the second CFA exam, he comes to me and he says, "Brian, I think I've got this whole investment thing
figured
out, and we should start doing stock options."
I could see the market. I could see which way it was going to move. And I had just learned about these calls, and I just learned about these puts, and I heard about these straddles. And I said, "Brian, I got it. Don't worry. Hey, I know you've been managing money for over a decade now, but me, freshly minted early 20s, I passed the test. I've got a great way that we could invest your money." And by the way, I didn't have any money back then, so I pitched it with Brian's money. And he was like, "You know what? Okay, he passed the CFA. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here."
So here's one of the worst things that can happen to you when you're trying to do these unique type of strategies is to win with the first one. So our first trade worked out really well.
Really, really well.
So then what does that do? That gives us even more confidence that we are so good at this, we should do more of the same behavior with options. Guess what, guys? I keep this account open. I turned $1,000 into $3,000, $3,000 into $12. And that $12 still sits in the account to this day. So you guys can see that you too can screw this up. And I think this overconfidence comes from a weird place, but we had a cool stat that FTE Daniel found.
Yeah, this is what we thought was pretty interesting. 65%, this is according to a study done, 65% of people think that they are smarter than the average person.
No, is it just because I'm so nerdy that I'm the only one? In all the show meetings, I started cracking up every time I saw this stat because we all know if once the number got over 50, it's not appropriate.
It doesn't make sense
65% of people think they're smarter than the average person. Here's another thing. If you ask somebody if they're smarter than the average person, the smarter they are, the more likely they are to actually say they're not smarter.
So we tried to do this little internal study where we went around and started asking all the members of the firm, like where they thought, everybody passed the test. Everybody started doing I don't know, I'm in the lower half. Yeah. So it was not as near. We did not get 65% of our population to concede to this, but 65% of folks think that they're smarter than the average person. Well, what that tells me is that there's a lot of folks out there that struggle with this behavioral finance concept.
So the concept we're talking about really is the overconfidence bias. And you see this in investing all the time. I mean, if you think about how often we see people that think, hey, I'll go time the market.
Yep.
I can get in this thing. Who needs to worry about where it is? I'm going to be able to figure out the perfect entry point or the perfect exit. Why else do you hear the saying, buy low, sell high? Well, heck, that means you must have the ability to go pinpoint the perfect time to buy in there. There's a lot of confidence to make that decision.
And what I think is so remarkable is we saw this like very, very vividly in the last election. We saw folks who said, hey, if this person wins, the market's going to tank. I want to go to cash. And then we'd have another person say the exact opposite. If this person wins, the market's going to tank. I want to go to cash. And they were so adamant that they knew exactly how the market was going to react to something that there was no way to know how the market was going to react. Yet somehow, because they read this article and they followed this service and they have this certain belief system, they felt like they could time it to get it right. And what we found was people were wrong. And people continually are wrong, whether it's in the dot-com bubble bursting, whether it's in the 2008 recession, whether it's an election cycle, no matter what the thing is, people are, on average, wrong more often than right when it comes to timing the market.
Well, you see this with individual stocks and then, of course, managed mutual funds. I mean, we recently did a show, and we even have a slide for this. It shows how often do the index funds, the low-cost index funds, smoke the managed alternatives.
Yeah, so if we spread this out, and this is from the Spivas 2020 survey, if we look at this over a 15-year cycle, 87.7% of active large cap managers underperform the index. If you look at mid cap, 82.2% of active mid cap managers underperform their index. Small cap, 82.2% underperform the index. And then if you stretch it out to international, 87.8% of active managers underperform the index. Now, we got comments after our last show saying, yeah, but there are, those managers who 12, 13% of the time, but you got to pick those managers and you got to get it right every year.
Every year.
Or you have to be able to pick the one that's going to do it for the next 15 years. We just think that that's a pretty futile exercise.
And that's why next time you realize there's a huge difference between speculating and investing. Speculating means you're trying to play momentum and all these other things. Investing means you believe in what you're doing and you have a long-term mindset. So think about that when you're talking about gold, options, Bitcoin. Yep. These are all distractions that I would argue are a lot of them fall into the speculation category, not long-term investing. So just make sure that you're not suffering from that overconfidence bias because it does have a negative effect on your finances.
Exactly right.
So, Bo, I thought this one was unique because you essentially made up your own behavioral economics term.
Well, you're not supposed to tell them that. We're just supposed to say it, and then they quote it, and they give us credit. But this is a real thing. This actually does exist.
So I want to tell a story. When I graduated college, I had several friends from other colleges too. It's not just University of Georgia. I had friends at Auburn University, elsewhere. But one of my friends from Auburn, he had this Ford Ranger pickup truck.
Okay.
Paid for. But you know what? He got a great IT job right out of school, making more money than any of us. I will go ahead and tell you. If you want to know what an accounting major from University of Georgia in the mid-'90s made, you started out at $28,000.
Okay.
An IT professional, even in the 90s, would start out around $50,000. That's a big huge
difference.
Money back then. And the thing is, he went to a big public company. He traded in the paid-for Ranger for an awesome Camaro.
I mean, Look, now I grew up.
His did not have these wheels. We had FTE Daniel pull this, but this is very similar to the Camaro. Now, realize he was from Alabama, and Camaros. And by the way, if I had this car in Georgia, I'd have been the coolest kid in high school.
Coolest kid in high school, no doubt about it.
I don't know now that I would want this car, but in high school, I would have been the coolest kid in the high school with this. But the thing is that he quickly realized the insurance premiums cost more than his car payment. Mm-hmm. He got rid of this car within a year and a half and bought a used car because he was getting eaten alive. And I'm just telling you guys, there is something wrong with the fact that he graduated college, immediately had a huge head start that he didn't have debt, he didn't have, a car payment. So he went out there and rewarded himself with this purchase just because he felt like he was deserving of it. But he's not the only one that made this mistake.
So this guy was in IT. So I'm going to give him some grace, right? He studied IT and technology and that sort of thing. Surely someone who graduates from college and they have a financial background and perhaps they even have a financial planning degree wouldn't do something so insane as what your friend did. Yet, young
FTE Daniel,
20-year-old, 21-year-old Bo Hansen decided that when I got my first job, I should trade in my paid-for F-150 that ran just fine, had no issues at all, for a big boy car. And I did not even care that big boy car came with a 9.1% interest rate.
Goodness gracious.
Because I had no credit. I was a young college kid. So I decided to go buy a 2005 Acura TL. And Daniel, I don't know how you actually found a picture of me driving this thing on a closed course, but that is absolutely wonderful. So I want to be able to pick on your friend that was in IT, but even really intelligent, you see what I did there, Reeves? Really sound people who understand financial planning still fall prey to this financial behavioral finance concept.
Well, this happens all the time. And we all know automobiles are financial napalm to your long-term success because we see this with doctors as well. You see them graduate, get through their residency, and then first thing they do is go buy the fancy luxury car, totally screwing up the financial order of operations. But it is this desire, the lack of self-control, the lack of discipline, the inability to understand deferred gratification is the building blocks, the adult marshmallow test, so you can take a little bit of today and have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. That's what's important. That's the behavior. So you need to be very aware of what's your coin term, Bo?
I called it accelerated gratification, right? So lack of self-control is probably better. But if we do not master deferred gratification, we accelerate gratification. We borrow from our future selves for today. We know that does not always end up well. In my specific circumstance, I'd have been much better off. Instead of going to pay that 9.1% interest, I should have opened a Roth IRA. I should have been getting my dollars working. So we know that if we want to be sound financial decision makers, we need to subscribe to the idea of deferred gratification. You always say save
just a little bit of today for a great big beautiful tomorrow. Here's the thing I always tell people. Wealth creation is surprisingly simple. All you need is discipline, money, and time. And that first part, that number one component is discipline, which is what deferred gratification is. Just don't overlook that. And that's why we always are talking about 88 times over. Bo, show them how powerful $1 can be for everybody out there.
That's exactly right. If you haven't gone out to our resource page, you can go to moneyguy.com/resources. Let me do that again. moneyguy.com/resources, and you actually can go download this deliverable that shows you just how valuable every dollar in your army of dollar bills can be. We know that a 20-year-old right now that can subscribe to deferred gratification, if he can just walk away from $1, it can turn into 88 by the time he's 65. A 30-year-old, if they can walk away from $1, it'll turn into 23. A 40-year-old, $1 will turn into 7. This just shows you exactly how powerful every dollar in your army of dollar bills can be, but also how costly those seemingly small decisions can be, like paying 9.1% interest for a car you can't afford early on in life.
Yeah, so don't let every dollar is so powerful. And go ahead and set up there's things you can do to protect yourself from this desire to not do deferred gratification. Is like set up automatic investment plans.
Yep.
Make sure you're maximizing the match. And then also begin with the end in mind. You know, that is a concept that is so powerful for all of us. Know what you're working towards and know your why, and it will help, and definitely understand the financial order of operations. It will protect you from a lot of these bad decision-making traps that you can fall into.
Love it. All right, so let's jump into this next one. Now, this one is kind of beautiful because I've gotten to see this firsthand. If you look at this picture, and if you're out and listening to this in iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, any of the audible ways you listen to this, you ought to go check this out on YouTube because we got pictures up here. Brian, this is actually me and you and a couple of your buddies in Las Vegas.
Yeah, you've actually been out to Vegas with me.
I've been to Vegas with you.
I've been going. Now, here's the thing. Everybody's going to see this, and they go like, Brian's a big gambler? I'm shocked to find out that the money guy is a big gambler. Don't worry, guys. I do not disappoint. It's because, and you pick on me for this.
Oh, yeah.
Is because I probably in my 20s when I first went out to Biloxi or Tunica for the first time, I gambled probably $200.
That was the bankroll for gambling on that trip, $200.
And now that I'm in my late 40s, I still probably gamble less than $500, you know, even though my income has gone in a completely different place. So there's I can't explain it. There is a part of me, but I get into, because on the next slide you'll see I've got there's Quentin in the background too, is that I enjoy, notice we're not on a craps table.
Is this in the high rollers room? I don't think this is in the high rollers room, is it?
This is a way to play craps and being cheap with it because you're playing on the machine versus with the dealers. And it really is. There's a reason that I'm this way, is that I can't stand to lose the money in the casino. I'm much more equipped to run a casino than I am to gamble in a casino.
So even though you could think about, taking $100 and putting in on the number and that number hitting and making $1 zillion, the excitement of that for you.
Well, the loss would bother me because it's by chance.
The excitement does not outweigh the potential loss of losing that $100. And there is a very real behavioral economics, behavioral finance concept that goes along with that.
Well, and I want to defend myself before we throw the concept up there, is that I know the odds. I'm kind of nerdy, so I know that they don't build these casinos, these huge man-made, just, I can't even think of the words to put how big, because the first time you go out to Las Vegas, you're
it's
like, oh
overwhelming.
my goodness. So it is, but I know how stacked against me the deck is, where that's why when people tell me investing is gambling, I'm like, you're crazy. Do you see the casinos they're building off of gambling? Investing actually works out much more in your favor because you can look at variables, you can look at values, you can look at trading prices. You actually get to put your thumb on the scale of success by knowing that the world is always evolving and you can tap into the innovation. I'm just not going to lose my money on something that I know I can lose.
That's right. I love it. And so the concept that I don't want to say struggle with, because I think this actually benefits you there, is loss aversion. This happens when the fear of a potential loss is greater than the enjoyment from a game. But you say it's because you recognize what gambling is. You recognize when the odds are stacked against you. Where we see this play out, though, is a lot of investors suffer from loss aversion because they don't understand what the odds are. And actually, potentially, the odds might be stacked into their favor in terms of how they deploy their army of dollar bills.
Well, we see this. I mean, because the markets are really close to hitting an all-time high again. So a lot of people are like, I'm going to sit in cash and wait for the next big downturn. Or you see people, maybe they got scared because of the pandemic that we had earlier in the year. They go to cash at the bottom.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, I'm going to stay here and feel better about it because that loss aversion kicks in. And guys, I'm telling you, you can create yourself a lot of trouble because it's just, we're in this ever-evolving world where we have innovation, developments. It's the law of accelerating returns. If you think it's amazing that we went from this iPod that's right over my shoulder to now we have these iPhones, now we have all these things, that's not slowing down. Innovation is an incredible thing, but yet we still will have people that will try to time the market or stay out of the market and sit in cash because they have this loss aversion and are just too scared to get into it.
And so, Brian, you came up with this idea that I thought was just beautiful because we had talked about how, you know the odds when it comes to Vegas. When you said they don't build these huge monstrosities without the odds
That's
being
a
in
good
their
word.
favor.
Monstrosity.
Yeah, I've been racking my brain trying to come up with it the whole time. So you said, hey, let's just go look. Let's just pick 500 biggest companies in this country, and let's just go see what the odds look like. Let's look at the chart, and let's go all the way back. We won't just do 10 years. We won't just do 15 years. Let's go all the way back to 1980. So that's what, a 40-year period, an entire working career, working life here, right? What I think is really interesting is if you were someone who was afraid, had some loss aversion, you were afraid of investing, what I think is really interesting, when I look at this, it does not appear to me that there was really a bad time to get started.
Yeah,
Even if you got started at the top of the dot-com bubble bursting, or at the very beginning before the Great Recession happened, even where we sit right now, you've probably done okay from an investment standpoint, so long as you didn't let that loss aversion cause you to make a drastic decision like going to cash.
Remember, the optimist in me says we're part of the law of accelerating returns, meaning that you're actually seeing all the innovation, the globalization of the world, how there's lots of things that are going to let this process continue to speed up. But when you look at a visual, and even though for my podcast listeners who can't see the visual, I want you to put this in your brain. Yes, there are ups and downs in the short term, but if you can just understand the visual, and I've used this a number of times, of you are a person that's walking up a hill with a yo-yo, meaning that yo-yo is going up and down, but since you're walking up a mountain, it's not even a hill, this thing is a mountain. Since you're walking up the mountain, even though the yo-yo in the short term is going up and down, you're going to higher and higher places. So just be careful with that loss aversion, because there is a famous quote by Peter Lynch. And this was his quote: more people lost money waiting for corrections and anticipating corrections than the actual corrections.
Read that again, because that is just so good.
More people lost money waiting for corrections and anticipating corrections than the actual corrections.
They would have been much better off just riding through the storm than trying to completely avoid the storm altogether. And I think that's just so poignant. We should realize that, because we don't know. A lot of people in the comments are saying, yeah, but we don't know what it looks like over the next 20 years, the next 40 years. That's true. We don't know what it looks like. But here's what we do know. There will be storms. There will be volatility. There will be uncertainty. But we've seen that even in uncertain times, if you have a plan in place, you have your risk right, you can control the things that you can control, it's not that difficult to set yourself up for long-term success.
You just said we don't know what it's going to be like in 20 years. Here's what I do know. I'm going to continue to be buying every month with my automated investment plan, because I believe set a system up and let it rock and roll. I'm an optimist. We'll make it through whatever comes our way.
Love it, love it, love it.
So let's talk about Bo. This one is you, man. Holy cow. When I saw the slide of this one, I was like, I don't even remember this fat.
Okay, so there's some things I'm not proud. Like the TL, I get it's learning, but I am not proud of that. This one, I'd say I'm not so proud of. Because, now I think we all, if we really think about this, we've all fallen prey to some fashion trends in our day that perhaps we should not have fallen prey to. This one for me, in middle school, I'm thinking like 6th to 8th grade-ish, was especially egregious. Now, I mentioned this to the team. A lot of the team didn't know about this, so maybe this was regionally where I grew up. But I'll be curious to hear in the comments if you had kids that were in that age, or if you were that age.
Show them the picture. I think you're so embarrassed you're not showing them the picture.
It was the Jinko phase. It's
Jinko jeans.
brand
Look at
of
these
jeans that were like egregiously baggy. Like they covered up your entire shoe. You couldn't see. When I was in middle school, this was all the rage. You wanted the big, huge, baggy jeans. Looking back at this, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? What were my grandparents thinking, even letting me like go buy these jeans? But it was the fad. It was the phase. It was the thing that was popular. And what I realized was the reason I wanted these jeans wasn't because of the utility of them. It wasn't because I could run fast in them or jump high or do anything special. It was only because it was what was popular, and it's what all the other kids were doing.
Just to make a description here, because we have podcast listeners that listen to this, they don't get the visual. These are denim blue jeans that bow out. They're not even bell bottoms. These
No,
things, like you could sweep with how wide. I mean, I got to say that on that guy's jeans on the right, those have to be 18 to 24 inches
It's unbelievable.
wide at the bottom. So these things are huge. What I've realized when I see these pictures and I find out that Bo actually participated in these trends, I saved you. Just you finding me in the wilderness. I pulled you out of the woods and saved you from bad decision making.
You know
if
what?
you're falling prey to trends like this.
You did.
So
indeed.
it is one of those things where, but I think there's a big, if you think about the behavioral economics where we see this is of course herd mentality because nobody in their just sane mentality buys jeans that have a 24-inch opening at the bottom because if anything, if it rains outside, you probably can't move because it's just too heavy to move your legs at that point.
And this is ridiculous too. Now, the bottoms always got wet because you're just trampling on it. It was just horrible. It made no sense.
So read the definition because I think this one's so powerful. Read the definition what herd mentality is.
So herd mentality is when we would rather travel with a herd even if they are headed for a cliff, even if they are making poor decisions, even if they are going in the wrong direction, we would rather blend in and go with the herd. And we know that in most circumstances in life, that's just not a good idea. And we have found, especially in the financial world, in your personal financial life, it is not what you want to fall
You want to be a
prey
contrarian. And I'm going to go ahead because we've got the shortened quote. I'm going to read the whole quote from one of the greatest investors ever. And this is the full quote. You'll recognize it immediately. Investors should remember that excitement and expenses are their enemies. And if they insist on trying to time their participation in equities, they should try to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy only when others are fearful. That's, of course, from the 2004 letter to shareholders from the Oracle from Omaha, Mr. Warren Buffett.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And we tell this to our clients, to prospects, to you guys all the time. When it comes to investing, if you can master this one thing, this one contrarian idea, you're going to set yourself up for success. Now, this is not what this says. Hey, you just mentioned, hey, markets are getting, hitting all-time highs. Well, if you're in a market that's constantly expanding, constantly growing, you're going to go through some all-time highs. It doesn't mean that you just have to sell everything and wait for the downturn. We've already proven that that's sort of a futile exercise. It means you have to have your risk, your allocation right, and you have to recognize both opportunities that present themselves. I'm thinking like Great Recession, downturns like, in the pandemic when we saw a big downturn go on earlier this year. And then you have to think about things you need to be nervous about. In 2007, there were some cracks in the wall of worry that you could be thinking about.
There's a visual for this. We actually show them the cycle of market emotions. FTE Daniel put this together because this is the thing. Now, look, I think it's an ever-expanding economy. So this is just showing you the yo-yo in the short term, whereas you can go through a cycle. But pay attention to people typically, when you hear the term buy low, sell high, that's what the goal is. But most people actually do the exact opposite, is that they will buy high and then they sell low because look at what happens there on the cycle of market emotions. At the tippity top, that's where you're going to dinner parties and others, and everybody's telling you how much money they're making in Bitcoin or individual stocks. And people go, wow, I'm so smart. I'm so good at this. And that's your point of maximum financial risk. It's and that's the herd mentality. Everybody wants in when everybody's making money.
That's right.
But then look what happens in the economic cycle. When we go through a recession, when we go through a depression of some sort, people go, got to get to the exits, got to get the heck out of this thing. And that's where you see capitulation, you see depression, and that's actually the maximum point of opportunity. But you know what? You can't give it away at that point. And that's why it is the maximum point of opportunity. So if you can be aware of this, understand herd mentality and be a contrarian, it will set you up for long-term success.
Now, somebody in here just said, I just wish I could know when the tops and the bottoms were. Yeah, you and me both. We'd all be very, very wealthy. If you're someone who's in the accumulation phase, a really good way to not have to get it exactly right is to be a constant saver. Have a dollar cost averaging plan going on, whether that's in your employer-sponsored 401k or 403b. Or whether that's contributing money to a Roth IRA or building money in a taxable account. If you're constantly saving, constantly putting dollars into your army of dollar bills, you will be taking advantage of that point of maximum financial opportunity when it presents itself.
Well, I've even got here's a strategy that will work. whenever, as soon as we hit bear market status, guys, just go ahead and promise yourself you're going to go ahead and have the fortitude that instead of trying to figure out how you're getting out, that you're going to be a financial mutant, you're going to be an optimist, and you're going to increase your monthly investment. You're going to figure out a way that in this downturn, you're going to figure out how you get more money, go against the herd, be that contrarian, and maximize your potential and opportunity.
I love it.
So let's go to the last one, Bo, and I'm going to let you kind of set this one up because this one actually came to us from some fellow content creators that did such a good job. We're like, we got to give these guys a shout out.
Let's use their idea. All right, so I want to give you an example. Let's suppose that you were this little stick figure standing right here, and you want to go buy some headphones. And those headphones you want to buy cost $15. Well, you know that there's another store that is 10 minutes away, so it's a 10-minute walk, that sells those exact same headphones for $10.
Wow, that's a pretty good discount.
You can either stay where you are and pay $15, or you could walk a measly 10 minutes and pay $10. You would save $5.
Wow, that's a pretty good deal. So I'd probably walk that.
I would walk that, right? If I could pay 15, pay 10, I would walk that. All right, so let's assume now, instead of buying headphones, you are going to buy a laptop. And as you stand where you are right now, the laptop costs $675. Or you could walk 10 minutes down the road to the other store, and the laptop costs $670.
Man, this is like one of those when they show you a dress and you're trying to guess the color.
Mm-hmm.
You just changed the way this entire illustration looks to me. Even though it's the exact same $5, it did something completely different in my brain.
That's exactly right. And so, again, this is thanks to our friends over at 2 Cents. This is what they said. There's a 33% discount on the headphones and only a 0.7% discount on the laptop. Well, because we perceive the 33% discount to be so much greater, we are more likely to take that 10-minute walk than we would on the laptop, when in reality, $5 savings is $5 savings no matter which product you're buying.
I mean, when I saw this, and by the way, if you guys haven't gone and checked it out, go check out 2 Cents.
Oh,
I mean, look, we
great.
get nothing for sharing that. It's just that I want to give a compliment where we see good work being created. This was a great illustration. They got some really good creatives that are obviously working on it. But it is one of those things, when I saw this, I was like, man, I think that even I, who consider myself a good contrarian, a good person that can spot, I have good emotional intelligence, I fall prey to this sometimes. Yep. And this is, I'm even going to flip the script to a financial concept where I see this happening even more, is this same, because this is talking about the power of the discount. Seeing that you could save 33% is just so powerful to you versus when it's only a 0.7% discount. I think that this also can play out to when you're buying stuff as well.
Absolutely, yep.
So when you think about this in terms of new car purchases, you're like, okay, I could buy the basic, if you're buying a brand new car, you're like, yeah, I could get into that car for $18,000. But you know what? I can get the one that has leather for $21,000. Even though $3,000 is a ton of money, you'll think about, man, but I could, over 10, 5 years, 7 years, I ought to do that, because not only do I get the leather, I get the moonroof.
Exactly right.
So you start, because as a percentage of the total purchase, it doesn't feel as big. It's the same thing when you buy a house. Bo, you just built a house.
Absolutely.
Now, my builder, he told me I can do absolutely anything, but it's going to cost you.
Anything is possible.
And I have figured out what that cost is. It's between $1,000 to $2,000 for every ask.
That's 100% true. And what's amazing is when you're building a house, you're thinking, man, all right, this is the total. Okay, well, it's $1,000. Oh, well, it's a mortgage. It's 30. Okay, here's $2,000. Okay, here's $1,000. When in reality, if I was walking through the grocery store and I saw something that was $1,000 and $2,000, no way am I just going to start willy-nilly grabbing them like we do when we build a house.
But in relationship to the total purchase price, $1,000 doesn't feel like much. The problem is that there's 75 things that you need to spend $1,000 on, and that's where it adds up. So I'm just telling you, that transaction utility is a legitimate thing that you need to be very aware of. It's because Yes, it makes you feel better. The bigger percentage, the better deal you're getting. But it also minimizes the flip side of this. The converse side of this is the bigger the transaction, the more you're willing to move things up because it's playing psychological or behavioral economics games with what's going on in your brain.
That's exactly right. And this is kind of the financial concept you should take away is that every single dollar is powerful. We've already said earlier in the show, money is fungible. A dollar here is worth a dollar there. Don't let the perception of value fool you. Make sure you understand what you're spending, why you're spending, and are you getting a value out of the dollars that you are spending.
So, but we just went through 9 behavioral economics concepts that can manipulate you, persuade you, move you to do things. And here's what you would think that it's so simple that you just need to go memorize these 9. And by the way, there's even more.
Sure.
But that's not the case. A lot of times, guys, I want to go ahead and tell you, these things get stacked on top of each other. So you might have somebody who not only offers you a free dinner, but then they might try to manipulate you with other ways too. So these things could be stacked to persuade you, even make this even more powerful. But don't let this stuff educate yourself, equip yourself so you know what your why is, what your financial order of operation. What you need to have all these tools so that you will be equipped to make sure you're doing the best possible way of getting yourself to financial independence and building wealth.
And our charge is we're going to be that resource for you to help you keep your ship true. If you've not gone out to our website, go to moneyguy.com. Make sure we have your email address. We have deliverables out on the website that you can take, you can use. You can send them to friends. You can share them with colleagues. You can share them with family members. We want you to have access to them so that you can take your finances to the next level. And we're going to be the resource that stays here to help you be aware of these things that you need to be aware of.
So we've talked about the abundance cycle. We work with clients in 42 states. If you feel like your, finances have gotten to the level that you do need a co-pilot, you've graduated, we're Johnny Appleseed planting the seeds. You learn, apply, and grow. Now you're at the level of success that you do want to take it to the next level. Reach out to us. You can go to Abound Wealth. You can go to Money Guy. And don't forget, we're so close, so close. We're going to reach 100,000 by year end. That's the goal, but I can't do it without you. So please go sign up on YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell for good service, and let us know you're part of the Money Guy family. Guys, we'll be back soon. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.